Alright everyone, we start off today with a much needed white pill pep talk. Because I'm going to start doing this more because I see more and more people getting black pilled, and certain content creators are not exactly being helpful with that situation. There's currently a demoralization campaign going on by the Uniparty in the United States. It's a demoralization campaign being carried on in other nations as well. Of course, Netherlands here, just slipping into a recession. Yeah, how lovely. Another recession. Us millennials have had our fair share of those at this point. I think this is the third one that I've been through at this point. Maybe fourth. I'm not even sure at this point. You'd think that at some point, if economists are so smart, this wouldn't be happening so often. Anyway, I was thinking the other night that there's one thing that has been brought up in this election cycle, by Vivek Ramaswamy actually, that illustrates a point that I'd like to make. Which is the dire consequences of allowing the globalists to win. And that's the TPP, actually. You'll remember this from the 2016 election. The Trans-Pacific Partnership was effectively in what it would have actually done. On paper, it was, hey, we want free trade between the U.S., Vietnam, all these other countries, Philippines, I think Japan, Korea. China was left off of it. It'd be the saving grace, silver lining on a very dark cloud, that one. And the idea on paper is just a free trade agreement. In practice, though, what it would have allowed is for government-sponsored entities, so they're getting government grants, corporations, to use that money to broadcast themselves into overseas operations on either side of the Pacific in the participating states, and lay waste to small and regional businesses and entrepreneurs simply because they have more potential investment funding. So a company in Vietnam that makes candy bars would be able to set up shop in an area where there are a couple of regional candy bar chains in California or something, wipe them off the face of the earth simply because they've got centralized investment from another country. So governments could effectively utilize taxpayer money in order to force smaller businesses out overseas. And then a U.S. firm, a box store, could do the same thing in Vietnam or the Philippines or something. It would have been crippling. It's a terrible idea. It should never be revived. Ramaswamy recently said that it was a mistake that Donald Trump didn't sign the TPP. When pressed about it, he said, well, I don't mean in the form that it was. It should have been improved so it was more U.S. friendly. But you can't improve it. So here we see a candidate who clearly doesn't understand the full auspices of the TPP. I will allow him to claim ignorance on that particular one and assume that he misread the room very badly. I don't think that Ramaswamy is a complete unipartyist, but it definitely raised my eyebrow, I will say. And that's the sort of thing they have in mind if they win. So here's my suggestion. Don't get black-pilled, get active. We can win. You've got to understand, the majority of people in the United States and indeed virtually every country in the world realizes the current system doesn't work. We all realize it. We just have different methodologies by which we want to address it. The far left understands the current system doesn't work. They'll tell you this 10 times a day. They just propose that you should reform that system by adopting something worse, which is socialism. Populists understand the system doesn't work, and they suggest that you propose populism. Libertarians understand that the system doesn't work. So-called progressives understand the system doesn't work. Hell, there are lay conservatives and liberals who will repeatedly mention the current system doesn't work. They just dishonestly boil it down to the two-party dichotomy in the U.S. and the multi-party systems in other countries. Well, it's this fucking labor movement's responsible for the problem. Vote Tory. No, it's the Tories that are responsible. Vote Labor. It's the same old shtick in many, many nations. Nations that still have a functioning government. Look at Niger still. Got some even bigger problems. The TPP is part of the tell. Here's the thing, though. They want you demoralized. They want you to look at the persecution that they're engaging in and think, oh my God, they're going to come for us all. It's over. There's nothing that we can do. We do have one last chance, in my opinion, in the 2024 election. This is pertinent to the U.S. mainly. We have one last chance to punch the Uniparty in the face. If 2016 was we grabbed them by the balls and then laughed at them in their pain, and 2020 was them calling the gendarme, 2024 can be us kicking the balls of the gendarme. Yeah, okay, well you're already going to get arrested, it doesn't really matter now, does it? If you're so hopeless, you might as well support Trump. Win or lose, at least you flipped off the Uniparty that you identify as so uniquely vicious. You've made your point. You stood on principle. Anyway, anyone else that runs is going to lose anyway, so it doesn't really matter. I think Trump's the only one at this point that has a chance of being legitimately elected. If anyone else were to prevail, I would assume that they were a uniparty stooge, a wolf in sheep's clothing, because the shenanigans didn't need to be pulled out during the election itself. Ballot printers didn't need to go burr. And it's again, I'll always bring up 2012, Obama v. Romney. Who cares? That was a totally fair, completely fair election because you had two controlled opposition candidates. Look at the shenanigans that happened in the GOP in that election. Like when the Ron Paul delegates weren't allowed to enter the venue. They were bussed around several times and while the vote was being held. Or the teleprompter that said the ayes have it with regards to Romney obviously getting the nomination. Well, he would have been nominated anyway. You should have had Ron there to make a speech, and his delegates should have been able to vote, but they weren't. So, yeah, that voice vote looked like it was smoother than butter now, didn't it? Once half of the delegates that were pledged to someone else weren't in the room. And there's plenty of shenanigans to go around. But that was the primaries. In the general, once your controlled opposition unipartyist Mitt Romney is in there, and he's shown his true colors since then many times, who cares who wins? It doesn't matter. The uniparty wins regardless of who the public elects. We have one person that we know is outside of that uniparty system. We know this due to massive legal persecution. We have the opportunity to simply vote no confidence in the system. A vote for Trump is not just a vote for Trump. It's a vote of no confidence in the entire United States government, or at least the vast majority of it. There are a few holdouts in there that are still semi-honest, semi-sane. You know, but unfortunately for every Rand Paul or Thomas Massie, you have 100 Nancy Pelosi's, so it's definitely lopsided. Effectively, the U.S. public has the opportunity to make the most legendary fuck you move in all of world political history, at least since maybe Napoleon came back or something like that. We have the epic opportunity to tell the system that we don't like it. We don't want you anymore. We're willing to elect a person that may very well have been convicted of multiple felonies in the general election. Nothing could be more American. The entire system is telling you not to do something. It's wagging its finger saying, you better be afraid. We're going to persecute you harder. Don't you dare. It's sort of like we should be like a little toddler. The parent is telling him, don't you touch that fucking cookie jar. You're going to get a spanking. Well, the kid got the cookie in the end now, didn't he? Yeah, he may have gotten a spanking afterwards, but he got his cookie. This is how we should operate. Troll the entire system. There's no time to be blackpilled. This is a time to be jovial about the epic troll that we can pull off on the entire uniparty. I look at it as a good thing. Even if we lose in the end, so Trump is nominated, again, possibly running from the Mar-a-Lago under house arrest at the time, the people have still spoken. And the Republicans at least can take some solace in the fact that they won't get completely crippled down ballot because they haven't pissed off a third of their own electorate in the process. And that's just the Republicans that lean towards Magadonia. That's not to count the millions of independent voters that are really on board with him. You know, some of those Trump Democrats from the Rust Belt still really love the guy, especially under the current economic situation. Don't get blackpilled. Get active. Knock on a door. Go and harvest a couple of ballots. At the very least, vote. Vote early and often, as the Democrats, I suppose, would say. Disclaimer, that's, of course, a joke about the Democrats' voting patterns. A lot of them seem to be 100 years old, and they've been dead for 20, 30 years. Wow, but they still got a voting form. We can put the genie back in the bottle with great difficulty, but I would also tell you one last thing. Your forefathers, without electricity, without cars, living a lifestyle in which they shit out in the bushes and then wipe their ass with oak leaves and shit like that, fired on their own government in a great show of fuck you, and in the end they won. We're capable of doing it without firing a shot. In fact, they want you to go crazy. What they want right now is riots. That would basically seal the deal for them. Look at how violent these populists are. We need to do more about it. We need to censor more online because disinfo caused this. We need to disarm people more because some of them showed up with guns this time, and it took a shot in D.C. It's not like there's not a mass shooting in D.C. every night just with gang violence, but yeah, most of it's gang members with Glocks. They would like you to believe that it's actually little Timmy who finally snapped due to his antipsychotic regimen. We have the chance to do this in the civic fashion. If the American people have grown so decadent and incapable that they're not capable of reacting to the obvious and very transparent corruption right now in the United States by simply knocking on doors, harvesting ballots, and then finally showing up to vote for 10 minutes. Well, I mean, that's kind of a disgrace to your ancestors. Some of them fought in the Revolution or the Civil War or something like that. Honor their memory and get a little bit active. Dedicate 5 hours of your life over the next year to civic concepts. That's all you got to do. In some cases, make a couple of videos, make others aware, and stop blackpilling them. Stop telling people the whole system is going to collapse, everyone's screwed, we're going to take a bow solemnly and step back on the world stage. That's not what I want. A world without the United States being a great power, within what's now a tripolar world, I suppose, along with China and Europe, is a bad thing. No, I'm not going to get blackpilled, and I'm not going to stop believing in the basic premise of Western civilization and all of the good that it's done simply because the government system that's currently controlling the coffers happens to be corrupt. There's always going to be corruption. You have to fight back against it. Let's hope we can do it at the ballot box instead of in other ways. I think it's the ethical and moral thing to do whatever we can, and it's much more simple than actually having, like, riot and revolution. Anyway, I think it's our moral imperative to defend Western civilization against the bullshitters that are currently in control of its legal system. That's about all. Peace out.